podcast. I'm Manu. He is Stefan Bienkowski. Is the previous show live show once again. Stefan, how's it going? How's your week been? Almost the weekend for both of us, which is nice.
It is almost the weekend, and with it comes my dad's birthday actually. So I'm looking
Ooh,
forward to Saturday afternoon. Saturday after. Sorry, I just had the live show play in my ears. So I've got to open the other browser. I thought you cut in. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him and my family, having a few beers in the back garden, relaxing. It's been a long week, I must admit. Um, Having a newborn doesn't help with that. It's very tiring. The days
mm,
feel much longer than they used to. I'm sure I'm going to have to just get used to it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this live show. We're trying to make the most of these kind of live shows. We're having a bit of fun with them. You guys can let us know if you like them. Let us know if you hate them. You might just be a ardent podcast listener and thinking, what is all this new age tomfoolery in the chat? If so, let us know. And yeah, well, we've got a few interesting topics to break down this week, Manu. Some people who maybe don't follow the Bundesliga might wonder why we've picked such an eclectic group of things to talk about. But there's two reasons for that. I think number one, we're a Bundesliga podcast. We're not just a Bayern or a Dortmund podcast.
mm,
Um, and there's also bugger all to talk about the Bundesliga because the title's been wrapped up,
yeah.
and there's about 7 or 8 clubs just swirling around mid-table with nothing to play for.
Well, we're actually gonna be even worse this week. We're gonna not just preview the Bundesliga action. We're actually gonna start the show in the second division, where, believe it or not, Hamburger SV, and this is not the final match day. This is match day 33, are 90 minutes away from completing promotion back to the Bundesliga. Um, Saturday, this is after all the Bundesliga action wraps up. You have the normal 3:30 kickoffs. You have the 6:30 kickoff, the top spiel in the Bundesliga. After that, at 8:30 German time, HSV will play Ulm. And if they get just a point, it is just a point, Stefan, they'll be back in the Bundesliga.
They
Which
will.
is that actually correct what I'm saying here? 55. Yeah. No. Yeah, it will be just a point. Like there's then still mathematically, etc. But a point should probably do it. Um, a win will definitely do it. They would be back in the Bundesliga, and that is 7 years in hell for HSV finally over. Many failed promotions, spectacularly failed promotions. I think two relegation playoffs with them where they failed to jump over the final hurdle. It'll be finally over. They'll be back where they probably think they belong. And it's there's 7-year-old kids running around Hamburg who have never seen HSV play in the Bundesliga. Think about that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's all they think about. They're not thinking about Bluey or Minecraft or any of those things. They're thinking about when will my beloved Haasfall be back? Let's be honest, these kids probably support Barcelona or Inter Miami or God knows what. Um,
Al Nasser.
but yeah, um, yeah, it will be monumental if and when it comes. I have to kind of chuckle to myself, and I don't know if we have any Europa Universalis players in the chat or indeed in our listeners. You guys can leave comment on the Substack afterwards if you are. But Ulm is like an inside joke in that game because it's this kind of one state minor, like city state, and they're basically the smallest playable nation you can do in the entire game. And there's all these kind of memes about people taking that small nation and like conquering the world with it and stuff. And everyone says no one, it's this joke that Ulm's like actually the strongest nation in the world. So that's probably the most niche joke I've ever said um, on the show. But if you're a Europa Universalis fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. Um, and yeah, it's fascinating. I did a newsletter recently on Hamburg and. There's Grant Vogel saying, "Well, the EU4 crossover. It had to happen, guys. It had to eventually happen." Yeah, like I said, I wrote a newsletter on Hasfal and the kind of mental block that has had to kind of come over that club over the last 7 years, and how they've hired sports psychologists to kind of help the club kind of go over this kind of concept. And I kind of threw in a bit of psychology in there to kind of suggest that maybe Hasfal have, been, and they have been self-destructing over the course of these years. There's no doubt about it. And I kind of actually looked at the numbers and looked at how many points they'd won in the first, I think it was first 14 games of the season, or the first 10 games of the season, and how many points they've won this in the last 10 games of the season. And consistently, except for maybe like one or two seasons, they've always kind of dropped off considerably in the last kind of 10 games. So it's definitely a kind of mental thing. And they've now seemingly got to this point now where they can kind of turn things around, and it's exciting. It's exciting for Haasfeld. It's exciting for the city of Hamburg. Especially with St. Palestine up as well. It's monumental in that regard. But it's also just great for the Bundesliga, Manu, because it's all fun and games when a big nation or a big nation. I've still got EU4 in my head.
Well, Hamburg used to be a nation too.
Yeah, well,
City
exactly.
state,
Yeah, that
right?
Hanseatic nation. Yeah, it's all fun and games when a big club kind of slips up and has a problem like that. But after a while, it becomes a little pathetic. It becomes a little sad. It's kind of how I feel about Manchester United actually in England. For the first kind of 4 or 5 years, it was good fun, but now I'm like, right, come on, just it's getting pathetic now. So we definitely need Haasfeld back in the league. We need Schalke back in the league. Cologne, I could maybe do a couple more years in the Zweite Bundesliga because they've just sacked their head coach and don't really seem interested in being a serious football club. But yeah, it'd be great to have Haasfeld back if and when they can. As Justin says, Stefan being the realist by saying if when it happens, and never say never over Haasfeld, Manu.
I know they're gonna go up. I said this weeks ago in a newsletter that I wrote, and I'm gonna stick with it. I think Stefan Kunz did a really good job putting a team together. I think they made the right decision to sack Stefan Baumgart when they did it. They were smart in their coaching hire, or not hire, but just sticking with Paulson right and letting him do the job. Um, they've been extremely inconsistent, of course. In a league though where everyone is extremely inconsistent, they have been the least extremely inconsistent. So, that is kind of how they got on this path. And it does usually take about 60 points to go up, and they're 4 points away from that, right? So this actually kind of tracks. I do think, I'm with you. It was all fun and jokes when it happened. When they finally did go down two, and they had to dismantle that stupid clock that counted up the time that they have been in the Bundesliga over a founding member never got relegated. They were in a fight with Cologne or Köln for a long time this season for first spot, and they're definitely in the driver's seat now, especially with Friedhelm Funkel now in charge of Köln. Um, and Köln was, of course, one of those other dinosaurs, as we call them in Germany. Kaiserslautern is another, the founding members of the Bundesliga that have never gone down. And it took until Hamburg was relegated, that the last founding member of the Bundesliga was relegated from the first division. And so, it will be good for them to be back. It'd be good for Hamburg's biggest club to be back. I think too the league with the attendance numbers and so on will benefit from it. Um, and I also think that if they make the right decisions in the top division, there's a really good chance of staying up because we all know that inevitably one of the smaller clubs will probably stay in the Bundesliga too, and St. Pauli will be in the Bundesliga still, and so there's a real shot of staying in the league and do sort of what Werder Bremen have done over the last couple of years, right, where they really slowly reestablished themselves. Stuttgart is another team that comes to mind that went down and sort of really slowly rebuilt the club into what it is today. Eintracht Frankfurt also went down, another dinosaur when I grew up that never had been relegated and finally went down in the 90s. So, there's a real opportunity here. And I think for the league too, there's real opportunity here from a commercial perspective. The Zweite Bundesliga made headlines, right, earlier this month for being the richest second division in Europe, over €1 billion in revenue. Um, And that says quite a bit about the clubs that are down there, that they can kind of generate this sort of money. And with HSV likely doing it against Ulm, I look at this table now and I also think to myself, well, there's a couple other teams that I really hope it plays out. Elversberg in the promotion relegation spot. I have nothing against Elversberg or the Saarland, which I'm sure is beautiful. But it would be kind of nice if like maybe that third spot goes to a team like Kaiserslautern, and if they then somehow can go up too, because then all of a sudden you would have three teams that have 50,000 plus seat stadiums back in the Bundesliga, and I think that would just be a wonderful thing for the league overall, Stefan.
Yeah, it's where kind of practicality and kind of romance butt heads, I think, when we get to this kind of stage of German football in the hierarchy. We've had for probably for just about not every season, but most of the seasons I've been covering German football, which has now been over 10 years now. Um, there's usually been a minnow that's been promoted, or at least one or two minnows every season have been promoted. And with some exceptions in mind, for the most part, a lot of them have just come up and been cannon fodder. We're going to talk about another club who we perceive to be cannon fodder and weren't offering much, and have made a late comeback fight in these last kind of couple of months, which is great to see. But it definitely felt as though the kind of distance between the Bundesliga and the Zweite Bundesliga um, was, too hot, too far to bridge for a lot of these kind of mid-table Zweite Bundesliga clubs. Tor has joined us and asked what we're talking about. Tor, we're talking about Hamburg, Hamburg HSV, and their imminent promotion. It would seem. Um, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It'd be great to see a lot of the kind of bigger clubs come back up and make something of it, because I think a lot of those clubs in mid-table, who we're seeing now in the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks with nothing to play for, um, have been able to kind of coast for the most part because there hasn't been serious contenders promoted. Yeah, you got your Union Berlins. Heidenheim obviously made a good go of it last year as well, so you do get your odd club who make an effort. But for the most part, no one's really getting promoted. That kind of sends like a kind of shiver down the spine. If HSV do get promoted, that sends a shiver down the spine of like 10 or 12 clubs in the Bundesliga, I think.
Yeah.
Because everyone suddenly thinks, if these guys get their act together, where does that put us in the hierarchy? Because it's easy to forget that HSV probably easily within probably the top four biggest clubs in German football in terms of their size, their prestige, their history. Um, they have billionaire fans who are desperate to stick money into the club, but they refuse to accept it. That's the kind of scale of the club we're talking about here. Um, and if they can kind of get back on their feet, it means you've suddenly got a club a bit like Frankfurt have done in recent years, I suppose, who
Hmm.
start crawling up the table, ambitions of being top four, and everyone else has to kind of step in, or step down and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. I also just kind of want to add something else. Merlin Posen, the very young head coach who came in for Stefan Baumgart, interim head coach, who got given the full time job. Um, he deserves. I don't know what the equivalent of a knighthood in Hamburg is, Manu, but um, he deserves something like it for what
Ehrenbürger,
he's. Yeah,
honorary
because he's
citizen
on
of the city of Hamburg.
19 games since he came in. He's only lost three of them. That's league games. Drawn six, 110. He's got a points per game average of 1.89. Baumgart's was 1.59. It's better than Tim Walters. Better than a lot of the guys I'm trying to look back and see who had a better record than him so far. And I'm going all the way back to Martin Jol in 2009 as the last Hamburg head coach to have a better points per game. Now, of course, a lot of those guys were playing the Bundesliga, so it's not really, you're comparing apples and oranges, but still, Poulsen deserves a huge amount of credit if he can get Hamburg over the line, because it's not just a sporting achievement, it's not just a financial achievement, it's a cultural, psychological achievement to get Hamburg back in the league. And as we joked, I can't remember if it was on air or off air, it's all kind of melded into one thing these days. We're going to have to come up with a new nickname for Hamburg because they are no longer the old dinosaur if they get promoted.
Yeah, um, that's an interesting one. feel Hamburg would place a solid 10 for like 6 seasons in a row and be a bit boring. I think HSV fans would take that.
Yeah, they'd give the left arm to be for 10th, finish 10th for 6 seasons in a row.
Honestly, I think if you tell them that right now, they would take that. If they can be like, oh, you be like Augsburg for the first 6 seasons, they'd be like, yeah, okay, sure. We don't have to worry about
Augsburg,
relegation. Maybe slip into
Augsburg
a
by the sea, as I think that's what they often call Hamburg. Augsburg by the sea.
need a new nickname though. That's an interesting one. Well, I mean, they call it the Rothosen or the Hanseaten.
Yeah, that's a much better nickname. To be fair, I've always much preferred that one.
Um, I always thought it's funny that a team that has blue and white colors plays with red pants. And
There must be something behind that.
yeah, the Rothosen. Um, no, I guess we'll see how they will do when they get back. I just think that the iconic team logo, which is so very different too than many other logos in German football, right? Just the blue slab with the square, the black square in the middle. There's a lot to like here, and it's also just the fact that they're just called Hamburg. This is Hamburger Sportverein. This is the Hamburg Sport Club, right? There's nothing else to it. And yeah,
Ah,
we
I have an answer for you.
hmm,
Do you want
go
to
for it.
guess why the red shorts are? Something to do with the city.
Yeah, of course. It's the city, the symbol of the city is red, right? With the two
Yeah, the
keys.
coat of arms are red and white, so
Hmm.
apparently the red shorts are a nod to that.
Okay.
So there you go.
And I guess the blue and white, that's the colors of the sport club, right? Because like many
Yeah,
teams in German football, they were originally founded, like the clubs themselves were founded before the football department was founded. And then, the football
yeah,
department was like 1860 is a good example. 1860 was founded. 1860 as a gymnastics club and tennis club actually, and they played in green and gold. And it was actually the soccer department that played in blue and white. So
yeah,
you often get like that's why you often get like weird color combinations in teams because like the main sports club actually has a different color than the teams the soccer teams. So, anyways, going way off track. Die Rothosen. I think that's what we're gonna probably just stick with. I think that's much better than the dinosaurs. Anyways, dinosaurs always go extinct, and they did.
yeah, yeah. Very good point. Very good point.
No, I'm looking forward to it. And this Ulm game is going to be, of course, it's going to be fantastic. If they do go up, I expect the scenes are going to be incredible. It is in the Volksparkstadion, which is an incredible stadium too. I've been there a few times. I covered the promotion, the failed promotion playoffs against Stuttgart there, where they were completely outclassed, and even then the atmosphere was absolutely insane. And so, if they win this game, or at this point, a draw could do it depending on how the other results go elsewhere. Um, this is going to be phenomenal. So I really urge people to tune in. I'm pretty sure it's actually on television on ESPN and in Canada on the Zone. Not sure what the situation is in the UK. I know it's always a little bit tricky. And then of course if you are in Europe, anywhere you can watch this. I think this is a must tune in game. HSV might finally do it and come up. And if they don't do it on that match day, Stefan, for whatever reason, which is always possible, they can do it in Fürth on the final match day.
Can
Tentatively
I?
planning to be at
Sorry.
that match.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I just double checking there. If you're in the UK, Sky Sports
Mm,
actually stream all their Zweite Bundesliga
there you
games
go.
free on YouTube.
Wow.
Um, I guess it's just, something they got in the bundle when they took out the Bundesliga rights, and they don't really seem to care about them, so they just stick them on YouTube for free. So if you're looking for somewhere to watch that game, you could probably, if you're in the UK, you can watch it for free on YouTube. I suspect a VPN of your favorite choosing could probably also help you in that regard if you're somewhere else in the world.
Hmm.
So there's a little helpful tip for you. And if you work for the DFL, the Bundesliga, and you listen to this, my name's Manu Vet.
What? Okay, sure. I do not promote any VPNs of any kind. I'm sure that the rights holder in the respective countries will show this game, is my
Well, yeah,
diplomatic
they're giving
answer.
it away for free. I'm sure it'll be free broadcast in most countries actually, because you said they show it in, is it on DAZN or DAZN?
It's
Sorry,
on the
in
zone in
Canada.
Canada, which you need a subscription for. But most people will have it because they also have the NFL Red Zone in
Right.
Canada. So
Okay.
and the Champions League and all the other stuff that you want to watch. So yeah, I am pretty sure if you want to watch this game, it'll be widely available, and then ESPN usually shows a top game in the Zweite Bundesliga, and if the zone is showing it, the ESPN is usually showing it too. So keep your eyes open for that. All right, well, let's hope this happens. HSV back in the Bundesliga would be really nice. Let's see, who they're going to join there, because the bottom of the table, it does look like we do know who the bottom three teams are going to be. Heidenheim, Kiel, Bochum. What we don't know, Stefan, is who's going to be ending up where. Who of those three teams is going to go down straight? Um, right now, that looks to be Kiel and Bochum. Or who is going to have the joy to play 180 minutes of fear, possibly more, as I always call it. Um, the relegation playoffs are always much watch television if you are a neutral. If you are not, then it's not fun. I experienced it with my club twice. I don't wish this on my worst enemy. It is because for someone it's just absolute heartbreak. And for the other team, it is just it's just the biggest relief ever. If you're the team that's finished bottom third in the Bundesliga and you manage to stay in the league through the playoff, it's just relief. But if you're the team that had a fantastic season in your division and you finished third, it is really horrible to then end up not going up in the playoffs. So I don't wish this on anyone. Right now, it looks like it is Heidenheim, but looking at this match day, and this is going to be a really fascinating game. Kiel against Freiburg. Kiel have been really good lately, and they're playing a Freiburg side that's pushing for a Champions League top four spot. They're currently in that fourth spot, 1 point ahead of Borussia Dortmund, two of RB Leipzig. They of course got a point against Leverkusen last week, right? This is going to be interesting. Kiel is increasingly looking like the team that could maybe finish up in these playoff promotion playoffs and give themselves one more chance at maybe staying in the league after all, Stefan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason we picked this game is because it's a game that both these teams will desperately want to win. I think people maybe thought Kiel against Freiburg in the second last match day of the season wouldn't be much of a showdown, but it has been. And for the most part, Kiel have been one of the better teams in form recently, as you said. They are kind of picking up interesting wins. They've obviously beat Augsburg, they beat Gladbach, they drew with Leipzig. They lost St. Pauli, interesting enough, and they drew with Mainz. Now, most of those teams have very little to play for now. Augsburg are mid-table, Gladbach are in mid-table, RB Leipzig are far from impressive. So this will probably be the first team in quite a while that Kiel will be up against who are also fighting just as hard as they are for their spot in the Bundesliga. But you have to give Kiel their due. I was checking just there in terms of points won in 2025. They're actually 15th in the table, so above Bochum, Heidenheim, and Hoffenheim. And there's some really interesting stuff going on at Holstein Kiel that I think's maybe behind their kind of turnaround in form. I think the most obvious thing is obviously the goals that they're scoring. Um, One of the players that I find most interesting is Shuto Makino, the striker, obviously the Japanese striker, who did really well last season and on paper has still had a decent season for him. 11 goals and 2 assists for Holstein Kiel in the Bundesliga is nothing to kind of turn your nose up at. But he keeps having these kind of rich veins of form and then he completely goes off it. So, for example, in the first 5 match days, he scored 4 goals, and you're like, right, he's off to the races. Then he didn't score again until the 21st of December. He scored 2 goals and 2 assists in one game, against Augsburg, which they won 5-1. He then scored 2 weeks later, oh, actually 3 weeks later, sorry, against Dortmund in the 4-2 defeat. That was halfway through January. He didn't score then for 3 months until the Leipzig game recently, and then in the last 3 weekends he scored 4 goals. So he's having these really weird runs of form where he's got a really decent return for a Holstein Kiel striker, but he's only done it in like over the course of like 7 weeks, in three separate kind of pockets. So it's really interesting. Another one as well is Alexander Bernardson, who
Mm.
has just been absolutely on fire recently. He's got 4 goals and 2 assists in his last 5 games. He joined the club midway through the season last year. I think he has a really good record actually at his previous club. I was just checking there who it was, Elfsborg in Sweden. So I think he had a really decent record there. Injuries kind of played a part for him. He missed much of the first kind of half of the season, came back for a while, then picked up another injury. But he's been kind of back in the team for the last 6 games. He's doing really well. So he's obviously been a huge factor for them. So they've obviously got Makino, who's on form, scoring goals for them, and then Bernardson, as a kind of playmaker who's set up goals for them. And that's two things that I've kind of alluded Holstein Kiel for much of the season. But I think the other interesting thing is between the goals, Manu. They've got Thomas
Mm.
Dana, who came in to replace Timon Weiner, the shot stopper, about 5 match days ago. And I actually looked up their stats to see if it's made a difference, and it's actually quite startling. So Dan or Danny, I'm always getting this mispronounced, but his shot saving percentage is 70.2%. Viner's was only 58%. And according to Opta, they have his goals prevented per 90 at 0.3. This is Dana who came in. So that's a positive. And then when you go to look up Timo Werner, who has the second worst stat in the league for goalkeepers, his is minus 0.4. So to put that into plain English, the previous Holstein Kiel goalkeeper was basically throwing in half a goal every game. He's throwing in half a goal into his own net every game. The new one who's came in for the last 5 days is kind of saving half a goal. Now I know half a goal doesn't make much sense, but over the course of 5 or 6 games, that adds up to 2 or 3 goals saved. So they've got a much better goalkeeper in place. They've got Bernardson, who's come back from injury, who's just completely on fire, and Shuto Makino's decided to have another rich vein of form, and that's kind of what's led to them kind of picking up a lot of unexpected points in recent weeks. And it'll be interesting to see what they can do against Freiburg, because Freiburg have put in a really decent run of it so far. A 2-2 draw against Leverkusen might sting, considering if I'm not mistaken, they were 2 goals up. And then Leverkusen obviously came back to grab a draw. I was also a little disappointed in them in that 4-1 defeat to Dortmund not that long ago, because that felt like a crucial game that they should have got something in as well. But if there's something that always seems to be the case with Freiburg, it's that they always pick up points to get teams below them in the table. Ask them to beat a Leipzig or a Dortmund or a Leverkusen, they go weak at the knees, but ask them to beat a team in mid-table or a relegation threatened team, and they usually get the job done. So I think this is going to be a fascinating game. And one more thing I just wanted to add, and I was checking the quotes from the Holstein Kiel press conference, and Marcel Rapp, the head coach, was basically saying apparently Kicker reported that his press conference lasted only 10 minutes and 24 seconds because he was like, there's nothing left to say. There's not much to say. But one thing he did say, which I thought was really interesting, he says, we have nothing to lose, only something to gain. If we get relegated, it's the most normal thing in the world for most people. I think it's more of a sensation to still be able to reach the relegation playoffs. So basically what he's saying there is like, it's just fun and exciting and unexpected that we're still in it at this stage. No one's gonna break down crying. No one's gonna lose their job. The club's not gonna go into administration if they get relegated. They're obviously a club who are well versed in playing in the lower leagues of German football, so it's not the end of the world. And that I think does a good thing of summing up what's happened with Holstein Kiel in the second half of the season. It felt like everyone wrote them off back in January, and myself included. And since then, they've kind of just flown under the radar because there's just no pressure and no expectation on them. And they're now potentially going to cause a late upset.
Yeah, and it just mind. Machino is a really interesting one. He's been heavily linked with a move to Gladbach. That's actually a story that came out in Bild and has been confirmed by our colleagues in Germany. That he's he's being considered there. He's only 25, right? And as you mentioned, like has a really good goal scoring record, although a little bit like a ketchup bottle, eh? Comes in bunches. Um, but yeah, I know I find this entire fixture really fascinating because um, sure, Rab can say that there isn't much to lose for Holstein Kiel. At the end of the day, you want to stay in the Bundesliga if you have the opportunity. In another year in the Bundesliga for them would be huge. Although I think depending on who finishes third in the Zweite, the relegation playoff could be a huge hurdle. Let's say it is Kaiserslautern, for example, right? I wouldn't actually necessarily bet on Kiel in this one. It's been a long time since the second division team went up over the Bundesliga team going down, right? We have to go back to Union Berlin doing it against Stuttgart, and that was a 1-1 draw on the road and a 0-0 draw at home. Last year, of course, we had the 3-0 with Fortuna beating Bochum 3-0 in Bochum and losing 3-0 at home and then losing the entire thing on penalties. So yeah, it is, of course, you could argue maybe that Holstein Kiel would be the favorite because to the Bundesliga side, I wouldn't necessarily go that far if they get one of the big teams in the Zweite. But it gives you the chance, and so I'm not necessarily buying the narrative that he's trying to sell us there in the 10 minutes and 20 seconds or however long it was, Stefan. I personally prefer when the press conferences are a little bit shorter. Coaches like to go a long time, so I'm not sure why Kicker's making a story out of this. maybe
Like I
maybe
said, there's nothing to talk about. There's
no,
nothing
like
left to
I
talk
guess it
about.
kind of is. I mean, like they have beat writers for every single club, right? Kicker does, and so they all have to fill their columns. And when you're in the Bundesliga team, you get like up to a page. So I guess if you're relying on the coach if you're relying on the coach writing the story for you, and you went into the press conference and he gave you 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and you have nothing else to report, I guess that is your report.
Yeah, that's very true. Exactly. If he says if he just gives one answer and walks out, you got nothing else to write, do you?
Yeah, the story is the press conference, in other words. But like there's also a lot like, there's really a lot at stake for Freiburg now, right? The
Hmm.
flip side of this, they are the team that is being chased now with 2 match days left by Dortmund and Leipzig. They cannot afford a slip up. Um, and I know they're probably going to look at it the same. They're going to say or spin the same kind of narrative that Kiel is spinning with them going down, as in like, oh yeah, if we make the Champions League, that's a bonus. We don't calculate with that. Like you hear that kind of stuff all the time from German clubs that are on the kind of level that Freiburg is at. But let's be honest here. If you forfeit on match day 32 with 2 games left, you are thinking about the Champions League, and it is yours to lose at this stage, Stefan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about Freiburg on the previous show last week and how they were on the cusp of doing something wonderful and how Matthias Ginter had been saying in the press, this is something the club have been working to for much of the last kind of 6 seasons. Um,
Mm.
it's a must win for Freiburg, and if they do slip up here, then it's their own fault. It's within their own hands. I'm not sure who they have next in the Bundesliga. I could probably quickly check.
Here, I got it for you,
Um,
but
oh, it's right
they
here. Actually,
have
they got Frankfurt, of
Frankfurt,
course. Yeah,
who
Frankfurt at
might be
home.
qualified for the Champions League at that stage.
Yeah, but you don't want to really rely on it. Um, as you don't want to be kind of hoping to beat Freiburg Frankfurt in the final match day. This is a must win for Freiburg. It's a game they should win. As simple as that. Holstein Kiel have been better, but they're still not a team that should be beating. Freiburg on any given day. And to be fair, Freiburg have kind of turned things around. They had a really kind of bumpy run of form recently, but they kind of turned things around, and they've now gone 4 games now unbeaten, including that 2-2 draw against Leverkusen. So I think Freiburg will win this game, but I think it's just worth noting Kiel's kind of impressive we won't go silently into the night kind of effort
Mm.
here. But interestingly enough, guess who Kiel play on the final match day, Manu?
Oh, let's look it up. I have it right in
Dortmund.
front.
They're away to Dortmund.
Oh, in Dortmund. And
So
Dortmund are
if
playing for a Champions League spot, I would presume.
yeah, so we've
That's
got Heidenheim
interesting.
against Union Berlin, and we also have Bochum against Mainz, and both those teams could take points in that game. So if Heidenheim lose this match, if Heidenheim lose this match, then they might be going to the Westfalenstadion in the hope of picking up points, and that could. We've seen Dortmund slip up on the final match day before, not that long ago, actually, in bigger circumstances. But yeah, still, it's an interesting kind of narrative to bear in mind.
I think I think there's a lot at stake for Dortmund here, um, especially if Frankfurt do manage to qualify for the Champions League on the prior match day, which I think they will. Then Freiburg, how much will Frankfurt really care? Is what I'm saying, right? So yeah, there's a lot at stake. The race for the top four spot is absolutely fascinating, not only because of Dortmund and Freiburg, but there's also Leipzig, um, and they are playing Werder Bremen this match day. Um, and so, that is going to be a really fascinating game too, to keep an eye on, right? Because Bremen, Stefan, could return to European football for the first time since the 2010-2011 season. Champions League probably a little bit too far. 5 points, with a bunch of teams in between them, and they have the second worst goal differential other than Freiburg in there. But it is a 6 pointer for that sixth spot for sure with Leipzig, right? They are 3 points apart. The goal differential favors Leipzig a little bit as well. But Bremen, they have a shot here to return to the top six and qualify for European football, which I think would be a really, really special occurrence for a club that, when I grew up, was always a force in European football. Went deep in European competitions, and won the Cup Winners' Cup back in the day as well. So this is, I think, this is going to be a really important match for them against a team that in Leipzig, who themselves are still eyeing up the Champions League spot too. So this is a big match for the European spots.
Yeah, it's huge, and we're talking about a Bremen side here who, if I'm not mistaken, I've had it up in front of me, are doing really impressively well in terms of the form. The third, actually second, sorry, most informed team in the Bundesliga
Mm.
in the last five match days, picked up as many points as Bayern Munich, two fewer than Dortmund. Um, and Bremen are such a fascinating club because when you speak to Werder Bremen fans, the verdict on Ole Werner is still very much out. There's a lot of them aren't really impressed with the way he deals with youth players, the way that he deals with his tactics. He's seen as quite stubborn. And there's actually an interesting story in the press this week about how he was asked about he was he, after the Union Berlin game. He basically made a remark about it's very hard to break these teams down, and I think someone basically said, would you be seeking advice or something? And he just kind of said off the cuff, yeah, sure, people can give me advice. And he's basically said this week that he was inundated with letters and emails from Werder Bremen fans. He said there were some very well researched, very well developed research, but there was a lot of confusion on a wide variety of topics. There were no limits to creativity. Let's put it that way. I get a lot sent to me now, mainly after games that didn't go so well. They reliably get in touch again when things go badly. So it's good that Werner kind of has taken it in stride. And I think the thing with him at Werder Bremen is that yes, you can criticize the lack of youth players. Perhaps you can say he's maybe too reliant on key players, and he certainly is. But that has kind of been the make or break for them this season. If you kind of look at their form with Nicholas Stark or Marco Friedel in defence, both of them, like basically Bremen just simply don't win games when either of them have been out injured You can go through that midfield. Mitchell Weiser's been a mainstay in right back. He's been
Mm.
outstanding. Romano Schmidt, I think, has been one of the best midfielders in the league this season. And of course, Marvin Dukes, who was actually heavily linked with a move to, oh, who was it?
Major League
I want to say,
Soccer.
I think it was also Greece, maybe, or Turkey. I can't remember this week.
Yeah, he's been linked to a bunch of things. I
Yes.
also would keep an eye on Bayern maybe buying him as a or signing him as a backup striker.
Nice payday for him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and so I think Werder Bremen, maybe not, maybe Werner hasn't gone things about the way that a lot of Bremen fans would appreciate, but you cannot deny that he's dragged his club kicking and screaming up the league table. Um, and we were just talking about Hamburg at the top of the show there. Werder Bremen were in a very similar situation to them not that long ago, and now they're on the cusp of returning to European football with exciting attacking football.
Hmm.
So it's fascinating. Werner was actually asked about returning to European football this season, and he also gave a great answer to this. He's very funny in the press conference. He said
Yep.
he's like, I'm very presentable in a suit, and I have a very wide range from Hawaiian shirts to suits. I have everything in my closet,
Saw
and I
that.
at least imagine I can wear anything. Did I just take that from you? Were you about to say that?
No, yeah, well, I did just read that too, and I thought it was a really, really good response. Of course, the suit is the reference to the Champions League, right?
Yeah,
I think that's too far.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of results have to go there. I know it's only 5 points, but there's a bunch of teams in between them. Sixth, I can see. Um, I also, I think Ole Werner is such an interesting head coach. I did my newsletter on Bremen last week and then what it would mean for them to return to European football. And, there is, he's still such a young coach, which is, I think, something that people really ignore. There's such a
Mm,
focus in Germany on all these bright young head coaches coming up, and he is only 36, right?
mm,
He's the same age than someone like Julian Nagelsmann, and doesn't quite get the same kind of headlines that Nagelsmann gets, Hutzler gets. There's a bunch of other names out there, and he has done, I think, a very good job. He's definitely not without criticism. We talked about the inability of integrating young players. It's not something that he's done has developed a good reputation for. Let's say it that way. But he's certainly gotten the best out of the squad. He himself said, "Look, we paying salaries on a level of a relegation candidate." And when you dig a little bit deeper and you look at Werder Bremen's finances and where they were, especially in those years during COVID where they almost went belly up, um, he's done a very good job with the bare minimum. Um, and I think that's maybe also where the reluctance of playing these younger guys comes from. His squad doesn't have the depth or the ability to necessarily compensate for mistakes, right? It's a very risk-free, um, risk-free, risk-free football that he plays, and so I think that's where a lot of this comes from. But like um, it's he's I think he's done a phenomenal job, and at 36 you still have the ability to kind of change the way you coach and adapt to changing situations. If Werder Bremen get into Europe and make a bit of money there, maybe that also helps with acquiring young players. Maybe also, with being back in the Bundesliga and having made Bundesliga money now for a while in front of a full stadium will help them bringing players up through the academy and they can be integrated. So, this might be something that people are critical about now, but it could change in the years to come. And so he's a coach that, people look at with two different sets of opinion, but I actually think overall he's done an excellent job there, Stefan.
Yeah, and it's also worth bearing in mind that Werder Bremen are still a big. They've always been a big club with big support, and that comes with a lot of kind of scrutiny and criticism.
Hmm.
Like the Oliver Burke situation is a perfect example of this. Now, there's been this absolute hullabaloo over Burke opting to let his contract at Bremen expire to go play for Union Berlin next season. and there's been so much written and talked about why he's leaving Werder Bremen and the betrayal of him,
Mm.
not getting game time and blah blah blah. And yeah, he's kind of by all means he's definitely stepped up in the last kind of couple of weeks and scored a couple of good goals. But Oliver Burke has been excellent as an impact sub, and that's usually how Oliver Burke plays well in the Bundesliga for a number of clubs. And it's that kind of interesting. I think that's quite a good example of how Werner has to be pragmatic. He has to be practical with his tactics, with his selections, and he can't really just give in to kind of romance or fan sentiment. Or I mean, Oliver Burke's obviously not a young player anymore, which is terrifying to think. Because I remember interviewing him when he first arrived at RB Leipzig, and it feels like it was only yesterday. Um, but like there'll be people clamoring for like, oh well, Burke's leaving because he never got game time under Ole Werner. Yeah, well, he didn't get game time because they had better players, because they had Marvin Duksch, they had Bittencourt, guys like that, and the system always worked. And it might not suit every player, and they might move on, and plenty have. But Ole Werner's job is to kind of get Bremen as high up the league as they can. And if he's doing that with kind of older players or with his favoured players, and that means younger, maybe more exciting players fall by the wayside, then that's just kind of the way that the cookie crumbles, it would seem. That's now 2 episodes in a row I've said that. I don't know why I've started using that as my tagline on this podcast, but it seems to be working. But we'll see what happens in the summer. But yeah, it's the very first thing Werder Bremen have to, not the very first thing, but what they have to continue doing is just establishing themselves, not just in the Bundesliga, which they have done, but establish themselves in the top half, a team aspiring to play for. To play for European spaces. And I think maybe once Werner's done that, they can start chopping and
Yeah.
changing with youth players. But it's a bit unrealistic to be asking a club like Werder Bremen to be playing youth players every week and still hope to be, where they are in the league table right now.
No, no, absolutely. And I mean, the Borg thing also comes down to money, right? There's the big story a couple of weeks ago was that Kevin Volland returned from Union Berlin to 1860, and as part of that story, it was revealed that he made 350,000 euros a month at Union Berlin, right? And I can guarantee you, there's not a single player at Werder Bremen at the moment that makes 350,000 euros a month. So this is the kind of salaries, and that's because Union Berlin have done a good job. They played in the Champions League, right? They worked their way up. They're now a top half Bundesliga team, and they pay accordingly, right? And Werder Bremen are just not there. If you're a team that plays relegation candidate level salaries, will be very few players in that team that will be making 3 or 4 million euros a year. And that's just the reality. And I think if Burke goes to Union Berlin, he's probably going to be in the 3 to 4 million euro range making salary. And that is just a hard fact of life, Stefan, right? That Werder Bremen just can't pay that sort of money. This is also why someone like Dux, for example, might be going to Turkey or the US, because he would automatically increase his salary significantly. Or Bayern Munich, which is now also a topic where he could be a backup for Harry Kane. Be thrown in every once in a while to give him sort of relief. He automatically would make way more money there. So this is a really big part of the story. I think that people underestimate. Werder Bremen is just not able to pay high salaries at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And they have to walk before they can run, and
Yeah.
they've been walking tremendously well. They've been strolling up the league table. Long may it continue with some exciting attacking football. It's a great club, great town, great
Yeah.
city, great institution in German football, and it's great to have them flying in the league. So I'd love to see them in European football. I really would. I think European football back at that kind of famous stadium under those floodlights would be wonderful to see
Hmm.
in German football next season. So it's also worth bearing in mind that their last games, I think, is against Heidenheim. So if they can beat Leipzig here,
Yeah.
um, and Heidenheim, they've got a pretty good chance here, I think, of getting 6 points from the last 2 games, which would put them in really good stead. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, no, and of course Burg against his former club Leipzig. Um, yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Um, Looking forward to this match. I think this is going to be one that I'm going to be watching, and obviously keep an eye on all the um, keeping on an eye on all the other action. Anyways, Stefan, let's wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed the live show, our third this week, I think. I love all the comments. And yeah, if you like this content, we have, of course, two extra shows that we do for paid subscribers, both here on YouTube, and then, of course, on our Substack as well. So keep an eye on that as well. If you're interested in getting some more content, that's the place to get it. Stefan, great chatting to you. We'll chat again, probably Sunday or Monday. And until then, everyone, auf Wiedersehen.